In this After Effects tutorial, we're going to talk about layers. Let's do it. All right, so I have this project in After Effects. I'm just going to do a save as. So File, Save As, Save As. And I'm going to save it where I've been saving my project files. And so far I only have one, which is an empty projects folder that I included with the exercise files. Of course, now it's not empty for me, but when you do get it, when you do download them, if you do, it will be empty. So I'm just going to call this about layers. And I'll click on Save. Now I'm just going to import some files so that we have something to work with. So I'm going to double click to import, and I'm going to single click on the video files folder, and I'm just going to click on Import Folder so that I have a folder with my video files. I can now select any or all of these. I can right click and I can choose New Comp from selection. This is going to give me a new composition. So if I click on that, we're going to go through this panel a little bit later, but just make sure that it says single composition here and click OK, and there you have it. So these are the different types of layers that I have in here. Right now, I have simply a video clip. But notice that one of them is different. This one has audio. See this little loudspeaker? The other ones don't. So these videos don't have audio included with them. Right now, you only see the top one. So this is the layer stacking order. You see what is on top. So if you move this clip, if you move it down in the stacking order, then basically you will see a different one on top, which is now the city reveal. You can also change the scale of this city reveal. You can move it, simply click on it, and now you can see the ones that are quote unquote under it. And you can keep on doing that and resizing. So this is not a lesson on transform or anything like that. I'm just showing you what the layer stacking order does. You see things from the top down and you see the one that's on top. So if you just go, hey, you know what, I want branch and leaves to be on top. Well, it doesn't mean that the clips under it are not there. They're still there, but you can't see them because they're being covered by this thing, right? So this other clip. So you can simply change the layer stacking order by clicking and dragging. All of these are video clips, and I know because of this icon. Now, this icon is the icon for VLC Player, which is my default video player in my system. If you have a different default video player, you're going to see the icon for your default video player. So these are video clips. I'm going to delete these from the timeline, and I'm going to have only one. If I have some text, and this is not a lesson on text, I'm just showing you now the different icon that is to the left of the layer name. This is my visual indication that this is a text layer. If I create a shape layer, and again, this is not a lesson on shape layers, but look at the icon. This is my visual indication that this is a shape layer. These layers, they present themselves with visual indication of what type of layer they are. If I import an Illustrator file, say this logo, I'm just going to bring it as footage, merge all the layers, and I put it in the timeline, right? So there you go. Here is the logo. Notice that the icon is an Illustrator icon, giving me the visual indication that this is an Illustrator file. It's the same with a Photoshop one, right? So if I go to Photoshop, I choose the same logo. I'm going to merge all the layers and put it in the timeline. There you go. I have now a Photoshop file as a layer in here. So I have a Photoshop layer. So pay attention to these icons and they will indicate the type of layer that you're working on. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these. I'm just going to bring all of these down again because we already talked about layer stacking order. Now I want to talk a little bit about layer duration. Notice that some of these layers last longer than others. For example, the longest one would be this one, which is called, let me make this a little bit wider so you can read it better. It's called Pan Hot Springs. I'm going to go to source settings, Pan Hot Springs, right? And you have a playhead here that if you move to the right, as the layers end, you see the ones that are underneath them. And right now, even though in the layer stacking order, this is number 6, there is nothing above it at this moment in time, so this is the only layer that we see. We can make these layers shorter. I mean, we could make them longer if we had more frames available to us, but we don't. So we can make them shorter simply by clicking and dragging the ends. See when I put my mouse cursor on top of this end, how it changes display? You can now click and drag and make these shorter and look at the visual feedback that you are getting. See, this is a different color, this is a different color, and yet this is a different color. So what in between this color and this color are telling me is that I have more frames available, so I can make my clip longer, but not any longer than the frames that exist, right? So I can also select all of my layers. I can move the playhead to say here, and I can say, okay, all of you layers, I want them to be the same duration. I want you to end here. So I can use the shortcut, which is Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and then right square bracket. And now all of the selected layers, and in my case, all of the layers were selected, will end where my playhead is. So how After Effects works is that where, or rather when in the timeline your playhead is, that is usually when things will happen, So if you are doing the duration of a clip, then the playhead is the indicator if you're going to be using shortcuts and that sort of thing. All right, so we have talked about duration, we have talked about layer stacking orders, and we have talked about types of layers. Now I want to talk about transform properties of a layer. So for that, I'm simply going to have only one layer visible, and I am going to change the workspace to be the duration of this clip. If I want to move my playhead to the end of the selected layer, I simply select the layer and press the letter O for out. Now I want to shorten that workspace, the work area bar, to that duration. So I want it to end here. So I can either click and drag it, we saw that in a previous movie, or I can use the shortcut, which is to press the letter N. So if I want for the work area to start here, I would press the letter B. B for beginning, so this is for the work area bar, and N for, I guess, end, right? So yeah, it makes no sense other than the N is next to the B. If you want to reset the work area bar to the entire duration of the composition, double click it, and again to end it, the letter N. Now I can right click the work area bar and I can say, hey, trim comp to the work area bar. And there you go. Now both my clip and my composition are the same duration. So when it comes to transform, we have these. In After Effects, this never changes. Transform properties will always be anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity, and they are available in the timeline. They are also available under Layer, Transform, and in here you have more options, right? So you have flip, horizontal, vertical, center in view, that sort of thing. You can also have fit and comp, and we're going to talk about auto orient a little bit later. All right, so nothing super complicated here. Flip horizontal is self-explanatory. So layer, transform, flip vertical is also self-explanatory. And center in view and all of those, also self-explanatory. So I'm not going to go too much over these things other than I'm going to reset this. And I'd like to really talk about these transform properties here in the timeline, but know that these exist under the layer menu. So layer, transform, and then whatever it is that you want to do. And we'll have a lesson in auto orient. All right. So anchor point is this visual representation right here, and it's going to be by default in the middle of the layer, right? So I'm just zooming in and out using my mouse scroll wheel, okay? So mouse scroll wheel, and I'm just zooming in and out. And I can move the anchor point by using this tool here. It's called the pan behind tool, but in parentheses is anchor point, right? And I can simply click and drag it to different parts. And but this is the thing. What does anchor point mean and what does position mean? In other programs, this is important, but not as important as it is in After Effects. So I usually in class ask people, what does position mean? What does position? This is the position of the layer, and it's measured in pixel coordinates. What exactly does it mean? And people usually will tell me is where the layer is. And I'm going to agree with that. Of course it is where the layer is. But then why, if I change the values for anchor point, why does my clip move? So I want to now explain things a little bit better. When it comes to anchor point position, scale, and rotation, we are talking about the anchor point. That's what these values are referring to, is the anchor point. About the only one of these transform properties that has nothing to do with the anchor point is opacity. But anchor point means where the anchor point is with respect to the layer. So notice that it's given to us in two values, x, that's side to side, and y, which is up and down. All right, so x and y. And it's given to us in pixel values. And if we change this to 0, 0, the anchor point is going to be top left of the layer. Top left. And the reason why 0, 0 is top left is because Adobe started as a printing a company. So it was for print. And in print, we start top left because we'll go top left to the right and then down. All right. So top left is going to be coordinates 0, 0. And anchor point is where that anchor point is with respect to the layer. Position is where that anchor point is with respect to the viewable area, canvas, or composition, whatever you want to call this. So if I change this value to 0, 0, now both my anchor point and my position are at 0, 0, which means that the anchor point is top left of both the layer and the composition. Of course, it doesn't have to be. Now, the importance of the anchor point is that if we do scale, it's actually going to grow or get smaller from the anchor point. If we rotate, it'll do so from the anchor point. And of course, you can change where the anchor point is simply by scrubbing these values, typing new values, whatever it is, or using the anchor point tool. You can just move it to whatever. And now notice that the rotation will happen from that axis and it will grow from there. So the importance of the anchor point cannot be underestimated. It really determines all of these things in transform, except of course for opacity. And opacity is measured in percentages, with 0% being fully transparent. I'm going to show you the transparency grid, and 100% being fully solid or opaque. So those values are limited to in between 0 and 100 because nothing can be more transparent than completely transparent or more solid than completely solid. So you are actually in between those two values. You can reset any of these simply by right-clicking the name and going to reset, or you can reset all of them by clicking on this reset next to the word transform. All right, the last thing I want to tell you is the shortcuts. If you want to see only the anchor point position, the anchor point property, select the layer and press the letter A. A for anchor point, P for position, S for scale, R for rotation, and T for opacity. And it's T because it used to be called transparency. So all of those shortcuts are very easy to remember. Please start using it, or otherwise you're going to run out of room very, very quickly. You know, there is no screen that is big enough for you not to have to use these shortcuts. If you want to use scale and rotation at the same time, press S and then Shift R, and then you can see both scale and rotation. All right? About the last thing I want to discuss here is actually how is After Effects upscaling something. Like if I go larger, I mean, this is still 1920 by 1080, and my clip is also 1920 by 1080, which means that if I want to show all of those pixels, After Effects needs to make up pixels somehow. And it does that by using algorithms that you can somewhat modify here. If you go to Layer, Quality, notice that you're going to have two options, Bilinear and Bicubic. Bilinear simply means this. If you have sharp-edged graphics, say, something that is not vector, right? Something that is not vector, and you need to make larger, some kind of a chart, some kind of computer-generated, anything, a graphic illustration, something like that with a sharp edge, you may want to use bilinear sampling, because the algorithm that After Effects is going to use is going to favor that type of graphic. However, if you need to do it with a video, a photo, something like that, in which you have no other choice than to create pixels out of nowhere, then I would suggest that you go to Layer, Quality, and you change this to Bicubic. Bicubic is going to be better suited for making things made out of pixels that don't have sharp edges, like a photograph, a video, that sort of thing is going to be more suited to make these larger. If you're making things smaller, it doesn't really matter, It's when you're making things larger that After Effects needs to just basically create pixels out of nothing, that is going to use this interpolation to choose the color of the pixel in a better way. So for sharp edges, use Bilinear, and for regular video or photos and all of that, use Bicubic. Now, you can change these in the timeline as well. If you see this, so these are called the switches, and I'm going to have a lesson in a later video about these, but just so that you know, when I changed things here under Layer, Quality, from Bicubic to Bilinear, see how this changed? So this is going to be, let me choose the layer. So see how it's this diagonal line made out of dots? So Layer, Quality, this is just draft, right? If I click on it again, always select the layer, this is going to be bilinear, right? So best bilinear. If I click on it again, see how now I'm getting this little like curve, kind of like a Bezier curve. Layer, oh, I always forget to select the layer. Layer, Quality, this is still best, right? But this time Bicubic. So you actually don't need to come to the menu. You can simply change them here in the switches, and I'm going to have a lesson just on switches in a later video. All right? This brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.